Good morning, everyone. We were trying to make sure we weren't going to do something too salesy or even too technical, so we're doing a bit of history this morning to tell you a little bit about how FireBrick got where we are. I'm Adrian, I think most of you know me, and I'm a director of FireBrick as well. So we thought we should start at the beginning. We've actually decided to start a little bit before the beginning with a meeting in a pub, but before that, back in Bracknell in '97, which seems like an awful long time ago, most people still use dial-up modems. ADSL was a bit of a vague idea in the future. There was some ISDN, and I used ISDN, so did a few other people. And some of you may remember the UK Telecom News Group. If you were involved in that, it was very popular in the day. I think it's all petered out now, but news groups were actually used then. And to put it in context, and I blame Alex entirely for this, apparently the Spice Girls were in the charts. So hopefully that means something to someone. And I don't know whether you've heard of it, but the BT price list was actually delivered on paper if you wanted it. Now, I had an argument with BT about some minor thing, and they kept sending me some leaflet or something trying to explain that they were right and I was wrong, and it had small print saying this isn't really the price list, you have to look at that for a definitive answer, and they'd send me more and more complicated and better leaflets, all of which said this, and eventually I got the price list, and it turned out to be a really sort of, I don't know, like big thick blue binder with double-sided paper in it, which covered everything from phone calls to cables under the sea or something. It was quite an impressive document. And it turns out anyone who had a BT line was entitled to their copy, and couriers would deliver updates to this, sometimes as several a month. Could be anything from a few sheets of paper to several packs of A4 double-sided paper in these really tough Tyvek envelopes, which are quite impressive. And turns out I wasn't the only pedant in Bracknell. Kevin Hones, the other side of Bracknell, also got the BT price list. Well, couriers haven't improved much in 15 years, and one day my copy of the BT price list got delivered to Kevin, and the courier then realised and came back the next day, and Kevin had already unpacked the price list and put it in his folder, and was able to reassure the courier that it's okay, it's exactly the same, he could send his copy to me and it wouldn't matter. And that's kind of how we met. In fact, Kevin had heard about me from UK Telecom, sent me an email and was gobsmacked to get an answer straight away. These were the days when email was marginally faster than using a carrier pigeon. ISDN was quite good, and unusually I was able to answer email straight away. But we met up, and we discovered we were both geeks, and he then bought an Orange phone from me, because back then I was selling Orange phones, mostly to Nokia staff, strangely enough, because they didn't get a discount. So we met up, and there's this nice pub in Bracknell called the Manor. It's a really old pub. It's a J.D. Wetherspoon pub. It's quite nice, and it turned out to be right in the middle between Kevin's old house and my old house. Nice and convenient to get to, and importantly, convenient to cycle back from. So a group of us started meeting up. It wasn't just me and Kev. My neighbour, who was also a little bit of a geek, would meet up as well. And these were the days when people had ISDN and modems, and a service sold by Tele2 was being launched. And I had this, and so did my neighbour, which was point-to-point radio links. I don't know if any of you used those. It was quite effective. Kevin had a tree in the way, so he couldn't get it, unfortunately. But we had these radio links, and Kevin had a BT NetStart line, 64K synchronous line, costing hundreds of pounds a month. And, ADSL was a bit new. I remember being dragged off to some talk by BT about this technology, ADSL, and I was sort of comparing it with how modems work. And I was thinking, this will never catch on because, well, it means putting equipment at the exchange, and that's not going to happen. How wrong I was. So anyway, we had these meetings in the pub, and lots of stuff was discussed, and things written on the back of beer mats and so on. And after a little while, we realised that maybe we could do something interesting, but it's worth explaining a bit about who we were. Back then, my company, Andrews and Arnold, well, there's our website. Believe it or not, that's my son, who's now like 21, using a really early mobile phone, the picture there. We were selling, well, it says on the slide here, Orange mobile phones, PBXs, telephones. We even did some domains back in the day when they cost a fortune. And we were selling ISDN kit. Now, Kevin's company, Watchfront Limited, he's a company with a couple of other people. Well, they were doing something rather different. They were doing contract engineering. So they were doing electronic design, power, data logging, control automation. They had sort of boxes behind the scenes in shopping centres to open the shutters when there was a fire alarm and things like this. So it's all complicated stuff, but it was all very much electronics. And they had done some work in the telecom sector. And as a company, they were quite unique because even back then, they were teleworkers. They didn't have an office. And this was unusual then. It's a little more common now, but they relied on communications, their ISDN and phones and so on, to communicate with each other and transfer data files. So they were actually using the technology we take for granted now. In fact, one of them even worked in Colombia at the time, which was quite strange. So between us, we dreamt up, ISDN's the future, we thought. And in the pub, in these regular meetings, we came up with this thing called an ISDN widget. And the idea was that existing ISDN kit wasn't very good. It was dedicated ISDN chips, but the software and the drivers were fairly crap. And ISDN could do all sorts of clever stuff in telephony as well as data, call deflection and all sorts of features. And most of the cards you could get and the equipment just didn't use this, largely because I think BT had no clue how it worked either. But technically it was there, and we thought we could make a box that could do all this. The kit that was there was somewhat expensive, so we came up with this idea. Now you can just about see there's actually a PCB layout on the back of the screen there. Essentially, this was using a very fast PIC, which is a small microcontroller. I'd done work with PICs before, and so had Kevin. This was a PIC going hundreds of times faster than a conventional small PIC, supercharged PIC it was called. And we figured out that we could do bit bashing. And this is where you use software to actually waggle the lines up and down rather than using dedicated electronics. And the chip was fast enough to do that. So we did a circuit diagram, PCB layout, and the idea was that this would be a small, powerful ISDN device that would be much better than the stuff you could buy and much cheaper. Unfortunately, well, it says ISDN phased out. ISDN was never phased out. You can still buy it. But it really started to be less relevant. Other types of service like Tele2 and even ADSL on the horizon meant we realized actually this isn't going to work. And it really got to the stage where we were going to have to spend some real money to make this widget. We were going to actually have to have some PCBs made. And we figured it's probably not worth the investment. But there was a bit of a silver lining. Basically, Kevin and I realized, hang on, we can actually work together. So, well, Andrews and Arnold was still making some progress. August 2000, we got our first BT Central, a 2 meg pipe into Reading. And that seemed like quite a lot at the time. It did involve me sort of running around trying to find some friends that said, yes, we'll spend hundreds of pounds a month on this for you. And we managed to just about justify it based on about 20 people, including Kevin, deciding to take ADSL lines from us. And we actually got a 2 meg lease line from UUNet back in those days. And you could get ADSL with this sort of USB modem frog thing that plugged into a Windows box, or a BT supplied black box router that would just do a single IP subnet. So it wasn't very bright. And there weren't really any firewalls involved in this. Now, this was in the days where people actually had started doing attacks over the internet. You actually needed a firewall. So we figured, well, we ought to do something about this. Now, just for your amusement, this is a grab from Archive.org of our price list. Yes, a half meg ADSL was 125 a month after a 350 install. And I think you had to keep it for a year as well. So it wasn't cheap. So we figured, let's make a firewall. And one of the first requirements in here was that it work in some sort of stealth mode. We couldn't configure proper IP address routing from the BT router to a firewall and then a separate LAN connecting your computers, because the BT router only came in one flavor of configuration, a single block of IPs. So we had to make it so that it could sit between the firewall and the computers like a layer 2 switch, but operating in a sort of stealth mode and still firewalling and session tracking. Traffic shaping. Well, we were trying to run an internet service with a 2 meg BT Central, a 2 meg leased line to UUNet, and some of our customers had 2 meg lines. Those were the days. And unfortunately, not surprisingly, BT messed us about because we were thinking, well, we'll get an 8 meg line, we'll upgrade. That took rather a long time. We even had to stop selling ADSL for about 6 months because we couldn't, in all conscience, just pile more customers onto this line. And what we ended up doing is putting traffic shaping in our FireBrick so that we could manage which customers could access which services, well, what speed of service, depending on the time of day. So our residential customers would get a priority in the evening and our business customers would get a priority during the day. And it led to quite sophisticated traffic shaping in the FireBrick because there was a need. But it was quite small. I have props. That's what it looks like. 4-port 10 meg hub, not switch, and a single port WAN side. No, that's the wrong one. Got a serial port on the back. So a very small box, because it had to sit next to this little router on your ADSL line. And, well, work began. So we got a nice block diagram. And rather unusually, we were plugging an Ethernet controller, well, 2 of them in fact, onto a little Hitachi H8 16-bit microcontroller. Now, people weren't doing this. You didn't plug Ethernet onto a tiny microcontroller, and you certainly didn't try and put a TCP/IP stack on something like that. Well, no one told us, so we did it anyway. And so we weren't sure, could we do this? We were thinking like the ISDN widget, can we afford this? And, well, Tele2 spoke to us, because they were selling these radio links, and they needed firewalls as well. And they said, they'll have 250 if we make them. And that gave us the confidence to actually go ahead and manufacture these things. So circuit diagram. That's actually a circuit diagram of one of them. And PCB layout and board design all went ahead. Even metal boxes. That was quite fun to learn how to find people to make them. And we managed to find manufacturers for all of this in the UK. So all the hardware, all the software, operating system design, everything, all built in the UK. Which is unusual. The software, of course, the hardware's all very well, but we started from scratch. We did an operating system from scratch. Ethernet chipset and drivers, TCP/IP stack, routing, firewalling, network code, even a web server built into this tiny little box. And this was like 10 years ago, which was, again, quite unusual. Most kit would have a serial console, telnet if you're lucky. We had a web server for configuring it, and this went down well. We had some fun with marketing. We've never been very good at marketing. We're still not. That's a picture of an actual brick with Ethernet ports just for fun, and a cuddly little green dragon. But it worked. We sold a few hundred of these things, even though Tele2 decided not to order. Well, maybe they were going bust or something, I think, but they didn't actually buy any, which is a shame, but we still sold some. So after a little while, having sold hundreds of these, we thought, we can't keep going like this. 2 meg ADSL was being superseded by faster ADSL. ADSL 2 and so on was coming along. And 10 meg limit on the FireBrick wasn't going to be enough, so we made another box. Looks much the same. And same microcontroller, but this time we put 100 base T, so 100 meg in it, and we put a switch in it. So that was quite fun. And that meant we could do something like about 10 to 12 megabits of routing. And this worked well. Even if you'd got an 8 meg line, you could use a FireBrick with it. And people who couldn't get 8 meg, even someone could get 5 or 6 meg, they could bond 2 lines together, and you could still use a FireBrick. So it was still going okay with ADSL up to 8 meg. Then we thought, we can't just keep scaling this up, we need to do something bigger. So we went for a fairly big architectural change. We decided that instead of using a little microcontroller, which is a little 16-bit CPU, it really wasn't going to cope. So we moved to ARM chips. Now, you may not know much about chipsets. You've probably all got an ARM chip, or 2 or 3 or 4, in your mobile phones. Pretty much most mobile phones use them these days, but they have been around a while. And this wasn't just going for an ARM chip. We were actually going for a processor that used normal memory, like you put in a PC. And this meant Watchfund having to get completely new PCB design software, which cost a lot of money, and learn how to use it, because this is PCB design where it matters how long the tracks are and whether they're all the same length to the millimetre and whether they go round corners or straight corners. All of this matters at the frequency of signals that are flying around to do this. So it was quite scary stuff. And it's the first time they'd done any boards with this sort of speed of signals. And the decision really was to go for something bigger. Not just a little firewall, but actually something that we could sell to ISPs. We were an ISP at the time. We'd got bigger ADSL lines. We needed something bigger ourselves. But the nice thing is, because we were starting from scratch, new operating system, new protocol stack and everything, it was built with IP6 right from the start. It wasn't bolted on later, which was quite an innovation. And what this meant is we could then make a scaled down version, the FireBrick 2500 and 2700. More pops. You can tell they're different. One's red, one's black. They're a bit bigger. So the idea was to replace the 105, the little box, larger case. Now, it is bigger, it is heavier. We did have a problem with the 105. No one believed how much it would do in this tiny light box that feels like it's empty. This doesn't feel like it's empty, it's a steel case with an aluminium lid. So it feels like you're getting your money's worth now. And you are. It's a very good box. Up to about 350 megasecond on the larger box. And we even put, well, gigabit switch, so that's nice. We even put a 3G dongle, well, USB stick to support it, USB port. So we've now got something that will do bonding and fall back. It'll handle hundreds of meg. The new, rather scary 330 meg fibre to the premises lines you can get through BT, well, you can plug one of these on the end of it, which is quite nice. But as I said, we wanted to do something bigger. And we're actually doing IP Expo next week. So that is the little rack we're taking and putting on the stand. What you probably can't see is that the APCs on there are because they can't cope with how low current they use. The whole rack, dual power feed, 2 APCs, that's 0.56 amps for the whole thing. And it doesn't get any higher when you actually start running traffic through it. So that was one of our quite impressive achievements, I think, especially with data center power costs these days. So we've got a box now. We've branched out. We started with an LNS. We're an ISP. We need to be able to terminate L2TP traffic. But it went on from that. We need to plug into links and LUNAP and people, and we need BGP routers that we can actually use, and we didn't really like Quagga much. I tried a Juniper router and sold it to someone because it kept crashing. I think that was my fault, apparently, but so we made a BGP router. I've been working on OSPF this week, so we'll have OSPF shortly. So we've made a whole range of gigabits throughput ISP-grade boxes now, dual power supply, very low power, and this is what we run our network on, and it works. So we're quite pleased how far we've gone. And then I've got SIP on the bottom of this, which was a wacky idea I had a few months ago. I thought, well, I'm sure we can do more. And it kind of brings us all full circle. Back in 1997, Andrews and Arnold were selling ISDN phone systems. One of our most popular products back then was this little 2-port ISDN phone system with 8 analog phones. And we actually had cardboard boxes made to order for this because we were shipping out a phone system, phones, cable ties, sockets, and instructions for people wanting a complete office solution for their telecoms in their office. And the phone systems we sold started doing data as well, hence getting into being an ISP in the first place. 2012, we decided to take our data products, the FireBrick, and put VoIP in it. So now we've got a phone system switch in the firewall. So offices need data, but they need phones as well. And it's given us this complete office solution still. We're almost back where we started, which is quite a surprise. So that's really how we got from there to here. It's amazing what you can start with a few discussions in a pub. And hopefully it might inspire some of you, if you have daft ideas, to go ahead and make them really happen, because you can do it. You can build a product in the UK, and you can make a product for a niche market and make money out of it. And you can build in the UK, unless, of course, you want cuddly dragons, in which case they're somewhere in China and we'll get them in a few months. Do talk to us next week. Come along to IP Expo. We're on for 2 days in the IP Expo, and we've got this huge, great fiberglass Orc there. We're behind the Cisco stand, and we put this Orc there so that people will walk straight through the Cisco stand up to the Orc, and we're taking pictures with him, and you'll be able to take away a little picture and a URL so you can Facebook it to your mates. So visit us at IP Expo. Any questions? Oh, there must be some. I've rattled this off in 22 minutes.
Adrian? John Morby, FireBrick. When's it going to have 10 gig support?
But that's the next step. No, it's a serious point. We have to keep moving forward, and we are looking at the hardware design for 10 gig and how the hell we're going to handle this, because this is a software router. We're shifting the packets through the processor. It's not like the old days with the 105, where literally every byte and every packet had to go through the software. At least now there's DMA, we can shift the packets a bit faster, but that's going to be an interesting step. Yeah, sometime, can't give you a date.
James Blessing, Limelight Networks. And what about ISIS support?
What?
What ISIS?
Oh, maybe one day.
It's taken me nearly a year to get OSPF support on the table.
I'm working on OSPF. You keep nagging.
I know, and I said I was going to keep nagging until you've done it, finished it. So I'm nagging.
It handles hello packets so far. It's going to do a bit more soon.
The candor is
step.
amazing, yeah.
Anyone else? Is that it? Okay, well, at lunch, we have some FireBrick glasses to give out. Nice pint glasses. We should have got enough for everyone to have one. So do help yourself. You can't have the dragon, I'm afraid. I've only got one.
But that's temptation now. People are going to spend the whole day trying to kidnap the dragon. You do realise
I know.
that?
We want to make sure he's ready for the show. It's a custom-made one, and that's the only sample. We should have 1,000 by the end of the year. So if you really want, send me an email. I'll send you a dragon.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions, then I think a round of applause. Thanks very much, Adrian.